here. Welcome. Welcome. I'm very excited I'm here because I tried something new this time in terms of pre-scheduling, and it seems to have worked. So I am thrilled and grateful to be here sharing the actual space and the virtual space and the cosmic space. Let's begin with a period of quiet sitting. Rooting down into some sort of comfortable seat, a sense of steady ground and assertion of physical presence. And then once physical presence is asserted in a way that feels sustainable, comfortable, relatively easy, and comparably alert, then we tune to the breath. Watching the rise of the inhale and the fall of the exhale. And being well prepared and patiently ready for the noticing of the mind's inevitable wanderings. And part of that patient readiness and preparation for that noticing is to begin again. Return to the assertion of steady ground, comfortable, seated, alert ease, and then fill in the gaps with breath over and over and over again. There's no limit to the number of times that we can return awareness to the present moment. Every time we return is a time that we have achieved mindful presence. Every time we return and begin again to get steady and alert and fully attentive is a moment that we accrue of real practice, valuable quiet. It all counts. Sometimes we do well to deepen the breath. Sometimes we do well to shift the positioning, the body. Sometimes we do well to just let the mind wander off a minute, to let it scratch its itches. We can be indulgent of our natural born tendencies to wander away in fantasy or memory or prediction, and even a little bit of worry or a lot of grief. Let that be a reality of this experience. And then the more we can return again and again and again and again, the more practiced we get at not spinning out in reactivity. So we don't end up adding fuel to the fire being the distracted mind and the fuel being our self-judgment about it. Let the distractions simply wither and turn to ember. And then without that fuel of self-judgment, we make more room, more space inside for this beautiful, peaceful, quiet ease. Take some deep breaths now, returning a little bit of gentle movement and present awareness to your immediate surroundings. The title of my talk tonight, "The Center Can Hold," is a response to a line in a pretty famous William Butler Yeats poem, "The Second Coming," from which the phrase is fairly well known: "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold." And I'm going to read the whole poem in a little while, but for now, considering the concept of how can we keep things together? How can we keep it together? Either our own emotional presence, the sometimes chaotic nature of our lives, sometimes the nature of our lives when we're in crisis, either personally or within a family unit or a community or society at large. And I think we can all really relate to that notion of the feeling, the recent feeling that things fell apart a lot. A lot of things fell a lot apart in our collective experience in the last 2.5 years. And what does it take to make the center hold? Well, it takes a lot. It takes patience, it takes compassion, it takes kindness, it takes community, it takes friendship, it takes tears, it takes processing of grief and acknowledging of trauma. It takes a village, a global village. But what does it take on a personal level? Well, a little bit of all of those things. And one of the things that I believe is really critical here is to recognize the inevitability of some sacrifice. And I've talked about this concept before here in this space. I consider it to be one of the 12 embodiments of a yogic state of being. Sacrifice is the thing that holds us back from going too far in any direction. In the Rig Veda, the source text of all of yogic teachings, the word for sacrifice is yajna. And it means that there's a phrase that describes it. It says, sacrifice is the navel of the world. I'm pointing to my navel here, is the navel of the world around which the entire cosmos turns. Sacrifice is the thing that holds the center, the thing that prevents the spinning out and falling apart of all things. We have to give up something. And in the profound wisdom of Mohandas Gandhi, or Mahatma Gandhi, as he's belovedly known, he was asked about this notion of sacrifice or renunciation. And he said, what was the hardest thing for you to renounce in giving up your belongings and being willing to spend so many years he spent in prison for the pursuit of the freedom of his people? And his reply was that he didn't have to give up anything. There was no renunciation or sacrifice at all, except for his ideas of who the possessor of those things really was. Who really possessed any of his belongings? Not him, really, in a metaphysical sense. Who really possessed his own personal freedom? No such thing. It was the freedom of the collective that he wasn't renouncing, that he was fighting for so beautifully and non-violently and in a way that inspired and moved so many millions across the globe. In terms of sacrifice or giving up a little bit from to be held at center, to prevent things from falling apart, I'm thinking about one concept about how our democracy, this fragile, relatively young experiment in the history of humankind, how do we hold the center of our democracy and not allow things to fall apart as they almost did very recently? And this principle is that we have to reconcile the innate contradiction of freedom and equality, these cornerstones on which our country is built. We believe that we are the most free nation in the world and that we have the most equality in the world. When you drill down, what we have to understand is that in order to have true equality, some of the freedom that we have has to be curtailed. We have to sacrifice. We have to come back a little bit to center. Unbridled freedom turns into unbridled power that has the gross potential for profound abuse. The freedom of enslavers in the South in the first several hundred years of the existence of this country as we know it. If you count from when the white man got here, the unbridled freedom that they had to pursue economic gains on the backs of other human beings who were not sharing equally in those gains resulted in a bloody war that really we haven't still fully healed from. So that's the sort of freedom that we can't have if we want the sort of equality that we claim that we profess to have. These battles over contradictions are a clarion call to find center for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. We'll do another period of sitting, and then I'll say a little bit more about finding center and what we might do well to give up, to sacrifice, or to renounce in order for things to be held together. So once again, find a comfortable position. You can curl up, you can recline, you can sit. The call to action here is to create a center that holds equal amounts stability and ease, alert awareness, and calm presence. And notice your breath. Acknowledge your physical heldness, the essence of being safely anchored in a particular space, in this particular moment. And call in some sense of the center of your being. Shine a light inwardly with your consciousness and see how deep that light can penetrate in your mind's eye, Does it find its way to the heart or to the navel or to the pelvis or anywhere else that feels like a strong holding center? And notice the directional pull of your thoughts into the corners that beckon, the siren call of the distracted mind to your centered mind that is in spirit with Odysseus finding his way home to center. Recognize our fallibility to heed the siren call rather than stay on course. And also recognize the simplicity of getting back on course by simply noticing the next breath. And then bring yourself back to your immediate surroundings, this particular moment. Move around, deepen the breath, refresh your position, whatever you'd like. When we are seeking to hold things together, there's often implications that involve relationship, whether it's relationship with a parent or a child, or another family member, an intimate partner, a friend, a colleague, professionally, a neighbor, or a community. This sort of sacrifice or compromise is happening all the time, constantly. We are sacrificing, if you will, around the edges of our separate individual needs to meet the edges of another person's separate individual needs, which will result in the merger for a greater good of the unit, whether that's a family unit or a community unit or a workplace unit or a social circle. It's that negotiation of, well, do you want to drive or do you want me to drive? What do you need me to not do right now to meet the needs of what you need help with more than what I need right now? This constant give and take is how we merge the separateness of ourselves and function fully to uphold each other in daily life all the time. I'm going to stop at this red light so you can go through that green light. You're going to take my payment so I can take this food home, and then I'm going to take the time to prepare this food so that you can eat it. And then you're going to eat that food so that you have the strength to go earn some more of that money that I just used to pay for those groceries. I mean, that was well, anyway, it's happening all the time. It's also this sort of suggestion of sacrifice or negotiation or compromise is happening inside us all the time. The word sacrifice comes from the Latin meaning to make holy. And if you equate being holy with being in a suspended state of balance or bliss, in fact, the Sanskrit word for bliss or eternal stillness is samadhi, which means an equal holding together of all things in the center of the cosmos, then we recognize that in order to experience this state of bliss, even just little blips of it, I believe that's possible for all of us, that we recognize that we're not all one thing ever, not for 1 second. There's a give and take. There's the very basic give and take of oxygen and carbon dioxide, this type of sacrifice, this exchange of one with the other. And the two organs most intimately involved in that exchange, the heart and the lungs, have made their own little compromise. Fun fact, the left lobe, the left lung has sacrificed or compromised a little bit of her space to make room for the heart that sits just underneath that side of the lung. So in a way, this sort of compromise or sacrifice is in our architecture. We are built for this. And when we move our bodies, whether we're in a yoga practice or taking a walk, riding a bike, playing a game, there's a give and take all the time. One step forward has another leg that's lingering back, and then we switch to even it out. We are always giving and taking to come back to the place where we're held in this steady state of centered ease, balance, and existence. the navel of our world around which the entire cosmos turns, has to be tended to as frequently as possible. The simple recognition of the truth of impermanence can help us get there. Because wherever we're getting pulled, we know that eventually we will be allowed to come back, to return, and to turn again back to that place where our center might be held. I'm going to share the William Butler Yeats poem now, The Second Coming. It's quite spiritual, biblical in many readings, a little bit dark too, content warning. But I fervently believe in its power to provide inspiration. And I'll talk about that a little bit on the other side of it, and then we'll have a final sitting session. The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So it feels a little familiar. It feels a little bit right for these times. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, hardly are those words out when a vast image of spiritus mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born? And in my reading, and this is just my reading, that slouching beast is the thing that's going to guide us back to center. Some may read this as that slouching beast is Jesus come again as the Savior. As a not a practicing Christian, I respect and admire that reading. And I also see it as the recognition of the possibility that dawn will come, the sun will rise again, as it does every morning on a small daily basis. But the eternal sun, the eternal light of joy and peace and reverence and hope and compassion and kindness and ease will come when this slouching beast shows. And this slouching beast is perhaps no more complex or scary or forlorn than our own hearts awakening to the possibility of still being able to hold the center when things seem like they're falling apart, but they really aren't. I'll invite you now to conjure a sort of totem or a place or even just a color that calls the spirit home in your mind. It could be a meaningful, beautiful place in nature where you have experienced some deep sense of joy or ease. It could be, like I suggested, a totem, an object, a touchstone that returns you to centered quiet, or simply the image of color or texture that you find soothing, comforting. And imagine holding either that item or that place or that notion inside of you. And with each breath, create the idea of a concentric circle widening from that place. Every inhale widens the circle or adds another one a little bit bigger that surrounds your reference point for center. Every inhale expands that widening circle, and every exhale returns to the held center. And when the thoughts break away from the concentric circles, come all the way back in. Hold that place, that item, that image. Feed it once again with breath and gently expand away from it. Just a few more breaths. And on the next exhale, just gently release if you're seated, chin down and heart up as they close down that space a little bit and move a little bit inward toward the throat. Another possibility for a concept of center in the body that hews to a spirit that's alive and well. And then bring palms together in front of your heart. And a nice deep breath. And I thank you for spending this time. May you be at peace. Take good care.